Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading, then we examine a single relevant question that passage points us to. Today I'm joined by Dylan Wilkin, and we are looking at a passage from Numbers 22. So the story of Balaam is a fascinating story. It's a story that raises questions concerning what appears to be some contradictions. So here's a little background. The Israelites are approaching the end of their 40 years in the wilderness. So they had already fought and won several wars against various kings. They've arrived in the plains of Moab and today, southern Jordan, at the point where it touches the Dead Sea. Balak, the Moabite king, was well aware of Israel's military feats, and he chose to take a different route instead of attempt to find this weakness to use against Israel. So he decided to hire this well-known prophet named Balaam to place a curse against Israel. The character of Balaam is intentionally ambiguous in the text. The reader can't tell whether Balaam was a genuine prophet from the Lord or whether he was a fraud. And this ambiguity requires us to notice what God wanted Balaam to say and to do. So the attention is on the sovereignty of God. So Balak sent messengers to Balaam to ask him to come and place a curse on Israel. When Balaam inquired of the Lord about it, God clearly instructed him not to go with the men. So Balak sent a second group of emissaries, a very great honor in the ancient Near East. And even though Balaam had already heard God say no, he asked this group to wait overnight so he could ask God a second time. So God seems to change his mind. This time he told Balaam to go with the men. Verse 22 says, God was angry that Balaam was going, so he sent the angel of the Lord to stand in the road to block his way. So what's going on here? So why would God give him permission to go and then become angry that he was going? It brings up this concept of God's allowance of man's resistance. So Balaam's decision said something about Balaam, not about God. Balaam had not accepted the divine refusal from the first time, so he wanted to hear the answer yes, so he goes back and asks again. God's yes to Balaam is portrayed as a demonstration of God's patience, God's wisdom as he deals with people. And God permitted Balaam to do the opposite of his divine will, and then he placed opposition and resistance in the prophet's path. So an angel of the Lord with a drawn sword. Balaam's donkey famously sees the angel, and he responds in fear. And Balaam repeatedly beat the donkey until God opened the animal's mouth and caused it to have a conversation with the prophet. Balaam had acquired fame as a great prophet, yet his donkey became a greater prophet with clearer vision. God demonstrated both his sovereignty, not to mention his sense of humor, and his patience. And there's some things we can think through as you read this. One, God is big enough to force man to do whatever he desires, yet he is loving enough to teach man, even through humiliation, how to align with God's desires. The honor of God is greater than the honor of kings and their emissaries, and so you should honor God no matter who comes to you. And God loves us enough to say no, and we need to remember that. So Dylan, talk about a time in your life when God told you no.
I was in 10th grade at the time.
2 years.
So 2 years. Yeah. So I guess now that was
Not
probably
quite
4 or 5 at this point, I think.
Okay, wow.
It feels like yesterday, but
a long time.
It feels like a long time. Anyway, in retrospect, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
My parents and I went to tour college, and it's an amazing school. I loved every second of it. I was truly in love with the school. It was Lee University in Tennessee. It was absolutely gorgeous school. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And I'm head over heels for it. I really want to go. I really want to learn there. And I really love the opportunities for ministry that it had, and things that you could go into there. It also had good film stuff too, which is what my interest was at the time. And so, anywho, we came all the way home. I was set. I was praying. I'm like, Lord, I really want to go to this school. It'd be a wonderful time. Me and my family are praying together that the Lord's will would be over that situation. And me, just being me and being young and I was confident. I'm like, I'm going to this school. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to love it. learn a lot, get to do a lot with my life. So a family prayer, and that was one of the first times that God ever truly spoke to me, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt what he was saying to me. And I was like, dang, that's really sad. But he told me I'm not going. And I was angry for a short time, even though I wanted to go to learn about him. I wanted to go and be at an amazing school like that. I was so angry at the time. And I was like, God, why can't I go? I really want to go. It's an amazing school. And later in life, I was able to find out why, right? Later in life, I was able to find out why.
To laugh.
What's up?
Later in life.
Later in life, as in 3 years from then?
Yeah. I think even Daniel's chuckling. He's only 31. That's a big phrase to use, isn't it, Daniel, for a 21-year-old? Okay. All right. I'm just missing.
I got it. You're good. But anyway, I was thankful to see why, because at the time I didn't know. I ended up going to Southeastern University, but then later I saw the opportunity for going into full-time ministry, which wasn't my plan from the beginning. So I was thankful for the no, but I wasn't thankful at the time. I was not thankful at the time.
But you are thankful today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think would have been different if you had done what before?
I have no idea. I was going for film. I was going away from home, away from some connections that I had here. I think being far away would have stripped me from those connections that I had. The only reason that, not the only, I mean, God can do anything, but the only reason why I was able to go into full-time ministry from a logical perspective was because I was at home surrounded by people that I had connections with. So I got a call one day, and she was like, hey, we have a job for you. I want you to consider it. And I want you to pray about it and see what God has for you. Just here's the offer. But if I was in Tennessee, still at college, that wouldn't have really been an option. I mean, it could have happened there, but it wouldn't have happened like it did. You know what I mean? Probably wouldn't be here today.
So if God is big enough to force us to do what he wants us to do, why does he bother trying to teach us to do what he wants to do?
I think it's by love, right? Our parents also want to teach us how to do things. Parents teach you what's right and wrong, not by and by discipline. Sometimes it's by discipline. Sometimes it's by letting you learn. Right? We have free will by God. God loves us enough to give us free will. So we have decisions that we can make. And that bites us in the butt sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't, right? Sometimes we're walking in the will of God, and sometimes we're not. So he does love us enough to give us free will. Sometimes that messes us up, though.
Did your parents ever force you to do things?
Yeah, there were some times.
Do you think God does?
I think there's times where he strongly advises, because your parents can force you to do things, but at the end of the day, it is your choice. I think, most of the time with my parents anyway, it was still my choice. I could choose whether I wanted to, follow what they were saying or take the punishment, right? I mean, God gives us punishments for things, and there's consequences for things that we don't choose to do in his will.
Have you ever been Balaam, or have you ever been the donkey? And if you have, tell us about it.
In terms of being Balaam, I will say there's been multiple times where I've had to ask twice. I've had to ask 3 times. God, are you sure?
You've had to, or you wanted to?
I wanted to. Okay. I didn't have to, right? God will tell you straight up once if you would ask, right? But then your doubt and your fear gets in the way, and what you want, your selfish desires, the desires of your heart, gets in the way. And so I think multiple times I've been Balaam. In terms of being the donkey, are you saying for yourself or for somebody else?
I would say for somebody else. Yeah.
For somebody else. I'd say yes, whether it be in a past relationship, whether that was a romantic relationship or just a friendship, being there to guide somebody along. But I'd say in the context of this, probably not. Probably not.
I've been called one more than one time, but not in the context of a prophet. That's the truth of it. There have been some times that I have been able to forewarn from what I believe to be divine knowledge. It would be certainly could count them on one hand. Very, very, very few times. Some of it I have been able to warn people from wisdom or experience, not from some divine revelation. That's a different thing. I think all of us have been Balaam from time to time, and the tension where Balaam is concerned is, when do we ask again, right? Because Jesus would say, ask, seek, and knock, right? Just keep on until you receive what it is you want. But I don't think Jesus was speaking of things that God had already said no to. Now, I think that it's the tension of understanding, right? In this case, I think God wanted him. The answer should have been sufficient, no. And when they came back a second time, he should have easily said no.
Yeah.
But it was clear he wanted to go. Most likely, there was some fame or money that would have been involved, traded hands. There was just a lot of things that could have been true about this. But finding determining, what things do I continue to ask for? Am I trying to get my own way? Has God already said no?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you already have a clear no, going back and asking a second time is a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just, there's a tension there to manage, and we just have to be aware of it. So,
yeah. And even if it's out of just doubt in general, why you're asking a second time. Like in Luke with Zechariah, when the angel appears to him and says, you're going to have a kid, right? He's like, we're old. There's no way we're going to have a kid. That was out of doubt. So saying that, and then basically, asking like, are you sure? That was out of doubt. And he was, blinded or deaf? He was mute. He was mute.
He was mute until for 9 months, I guess. And so, as a matter of fact, he didn't speak again until after he named him. He had to write it down.
That's crazy. Down. So, yeah, that's wild.
Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around our daily Bible reading.